Welcome to Unofficial Canon, a Star Wars podcast. I'm Tavin.
I'm Brendan.
And we are continuing our conversation from last week about The Phantom Menace. Before we get into it, I need to issue a small retraction. I kept calling the droid that is the protagonist of The Phantom Menace. I keep calling her TC-16, I think. It's actually TC-14.
Oh.
So I just need to...
You lost some nerd credit
I
there.
did lose some nerd credit. It was close, but not close enough. So anyway, so last we left off with the Jedi in...
They were just leaving.
They were in the hangar. They were splitting up, and they were going to run off. But one thing that I want to touch on before we get back on track is last episode I did reveal that I had been reading the novelization of the Phantom Menace, and I just wanted to touch on why all of this is happening.
Yeah,
according
please.
to the book. So, first of all, it still doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Like, to me, I still don't quite get it. And I read this book. It wasn't like I skimmed it. I read this book. And from what I can guess is that, so the Republic has put some kind of taxation on trade routes.
Okay.
And the Trade Federation, being a trade federation...
Kind of against it.
Is kind of against it. So the blockade starts out as more of like a protest.
Okay.
Kind of like how you would like picket a company, but this is like
Right.
we blocked off the world. And like that's kind of how it starts and how they justify it. And then Sidious is actually behind this and he kind of escalates it for his own
Selfish gain.
which it's still like there's not a whole bunch of detail about it. Like it's not like, well, they raised the federal tax by 12% on these trade routes, which is thank God. But it's enough that like, okay, I can figure out kind of what's going on.
Right.
So, and I would suspect that this, whatever bill or legislation that put the tax in place was probably somehow manipulated by Palpatine.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll get into like, I finally understand why this movie happens. And there's one line of dialogue that
explains
to me,
the
the
existence
whole
of this
movie
2 hour.
the whole movie hinges on this one line of dialogue. Anyway, so continuing on with our story. So the Jedi go down to the planet. In the book, this is when we cut away back to Tatooine.
Oh.
Because there's a couple, I think this is the last scene that on Tatooine that happens in the book that doesn't happen in the movie.
Okay.
But it's a very interesting scene. And I had talked about in the last episode how there's things in this book that I feel like set up stuff for Attack the Clones that someone would have to have some knowledge of clones to understand. So we're back on Tatooine. Anakin is just working at Watto's, and Watto is like, okay, here, take these various junk pieces.
Yeah.
Go out to the desert, find the Jawas, and trade for some droids.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because, we're like, okay, so what do we know about Star Wars and Tatooine? Jawas.
Droids.
And their trade. There's a couple things that this sets up. One is that Watto doesn't really deal in money. He deals in trading.
Right.
And
he's a believer in the barter economy.
Yeah. The barter, there's money is... I don't think it would have mattered. The book kind of sets it up where it wouldn't have mattered what kind of currency. Like Watto wouldn't have really taken it. He's more interested in like the trading up principle. So Anakin takes like a speeder and a half-finished C-3PO, which Watto doesn't know about, out to the Jawas, and C-3PO helps him pick out the best droids. He's basically just like, which ones have the best specs, right? And C3 was like, well, that one has a GTX 970 and that one has a GTX 1080. And so they get the best droids. And he gets like 4 or 5 droids and he can't fit them all on the speeder. So he has to do this like kind of slow trek across the desert.
Sort of like put the speeder in first gear and we'll have all these droids just
he
walk.
puts like C3PO on the back to watch them and they just kind of like
single
walk.
file. Yeah.
Yeah, walk. And like the book's like, okay, so we should be back by like sundown-ish. And on his way, he encounters a Tusken Raider who has been pinned under a giant boulder.
Oh.
And Anakin kind of wrestles with what to do.
Right.
But eventually helps the Tusken Raider. So he removes all the boulders from him and like sits him up, and the Tusken Raider won't say anything to him, and he gets C-3PO to try to do it.
Do a translation.
And
I'd love to hear C-3PO speak in Tusken Raider.
The only thing that Tusken Raider says to C-3PO is "shut up."
Okay, well
which is brilliant.
That makes sense.
It's great. But this whole thing like takes way too long, and so then he has to end up staying the night. And so Anakin falls asleep and has some dreams that I think they're kind of like bad dreams or strange dreams. Because he dreams about being a pilot, and then he dreams about being a Jedi, and he dreams about a bunch of various things, right? And then he's woken up, and he's surrounded by Tusken Raiders.
Oh.
And long story short, they just leave.
Right. So it's like, we normally would kill you.
We would just take your droids and kill you, but you save this dude, so it's fine. And the reason I say that's kind of interesting in the context of Attack of the Clones is because it's such a role reversal for what actually happens in Clones, where he kills all the Tusken Raiders.
Mm-hmm. I believe slaughters them like animals.
So it's like they're setting up, here's the character arc, right?
Right.
And they're showing his descent into the dark side of the Force, basically. And that's the scene. Like that, he gets back and everything's fine. His Shmi. She's like, oh no, why were you out late?
Yeah.
Which actually you never get in the movie.
No.
Well, that's another thing. Like Shmi is actually a character in the book who like reacts to things like a mother would.
not just quietly with a sad face.
Yeah, basically. So that's the scene that happens in the book. And it's kind of interesting, and it gives us more a little bit about Anakin and his abilities and blah, blah, blah. Some would say that it continues to set up his Mary Sue-like abilities.
Well, I think that's a Skywalker trait.
Anyway, so then we cut back to the Jedi.
Right.
Who are down on the planet.
Yeah.
We start with Qui-Gon.
Who
is like, in Prometheus logic, is running straight away from the rolling donut.
So this was the last nitpick that I didn't write down. Why is he running when he makes it very clear that once you lay down and have the repulsor lifts go over you, you're fine?
Yeah, I don't, and I've heard people say it's because he sees Jar Jar and he wants to like help Jar Jar.
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't. And in the book, it makes it very clear that he's like just pissed off at Jar Jar. Like just because Jar Jar just latches onto him, and in the movie it's clear too, right? Like it's very clear that Jar Jar is an annoyance at this point. Little known fact: Jar Jar was hunting for mussels in that scene.
Oh, was he?
According to the book, that's why he's there randomly in the swamp. That's the kind of detail we bring to you on Unofficial Canon.
Don't say we don't know this.
Anyway, so this is usually the part where I'm done. Like I have made it to this point multiple times and turned the TV off. When I first started dating my now wife, we tried watching Phantom Menace because she had not seen any Star Wars movies, and I got to this point and I just turned it off. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is that the CG for Jar Jar in the scene is horrendous.
It's so bad.
All the creature CG is bad.
Mm-hmm.
All of it. There's not, well, that's not true. There's one scene where I'm like, Jar Jar looks really good. And I was like, how and why? Because, and it's funny because I started watching this movie and initially I'm like, wow, the CG really holds up. Like the ships
look good.
And the invasion. And even though like the droids look like super good, right? And then we get to Jar Jar and it's like clear, it's like really bad CG and then really bad compositing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and this comes back to like, this was shot on digital. And people know how to composite on film because there's a bunch of things that you do with the film grain to kind of simulate like the person's actually there.
Right.
But digital is so clean that things, when you just put something into the frame, you can tell that it's just put into the frame.
Very, very clearly.
Every hologram in the whole movie has this problem. Mm-hmm. Except for maybe the Sidious on the ship. And I think it might have something to do with that. That's like in a very controlled studio environment.
Yes.
And it's a little bit better, but there's still parts where it's like Padme's listening to like the hologram on the ship of the governor or whatever. And it's just like, it looks like some kid in After Effects did it, which at that point in history, probably some
true.
Kid.
Probably true. Which, and for holograms, considering this movie is from 1999, I'm fine to just be like, okay, that was just a limit of the technology. and holograms have already been established. This is how you're choosing to do it, so it's not going to look all that great. But why they chose to do a full character in CG in 1999?
Oh, it's the James Cameron effect, right? It's like I'm gonna break new technology and push.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's funny because George Lucas did do that with the original trilogy. Like,
yes.
Empire invented compositing technology, digital compositing technology, and this movie just doesn't do a very good job at it. And that's my problem. It's like the Princess Leia hologram scene in the original Star Wars looks really good. It looks like there's a hologram in the scene.
Yes.
And then this movie never gets to that same level again.
No, that is true. Which is like, yeah, on a watch of Phantom Menace independently, the hologram, I'm like, whatever. But then if you like watch Phantom Menace and A New Hope and you're like, well, but how could they do this better in 77?
Yeah. And it just comes down, like I said, it just comes down to the fact that they were just pushing the technology so far that it just wasn't ready, right? I had just watched Revenge of the Sith prior to this for New Year's, and like everything looks pretty good in that. So I think it's just time and technique. Anyway, so he encounters Jar Jar, who is then... I cannot understand anything Jar Jar says in this movie.
No. And I was just going to say that, is that not only does he look bad, but you have no idea what this character is saying.
I remember even as a child not really understanding what Jar Jar was saying. I just watched an interview with the guy who played Boss Nass, who's like apparently a very
Brian Blessed.
Yeah. I'd never heard of this guy before. So I did some research. He's a very interesting fellow, but he was talking in this interview about how he had actually said something to George Lucas.
He went too far
where he went too far with the noises that Jar Jar made. And it's very interesting hearing like a seasoned actor talk about this, where he was saying that when you deliver a line that's got plot in it, you have to keep, even with an accent, you got to keep certain words so they make sense, right? And it's true, because watching this again, it's like Boss Nass has a weird voice, but I understand everything he's saying.
Yes.
Jar Jar, it's like 50-50.
Yeah.
There's times when I just don't understand what Jar Jar is saying. And actually reading the novelization helped a lot, because I knew what Jar Jar was saying.
You could actually see the letters that made up the word that he's spouting.
And then watching it again, I was like, oh, that's him saying that. Wow, he delivered that line horrendously. So yes, they meets up with Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Can't understand him.
Yeah.
He's talking about the other thing is like they called the droid Mechanex, and this was after reading the novel did I understand what he was saying with that word. He's meaning the droids. Okay.
Why not just have him say droids?
Because that's not racist to African American people of a certain descent.
Misa understand.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna take a minute here. Okay. So I meet up with Jar Jar.
Yeah.
And Jar Jar says some garbage about, I was having a perfectly fine day until this happened. Thanks for saving me.
Yeah.
I owe you a life debt. The gods, which we will not talk about.
No.
Gungan religion at any point in this movie.
Any point further.
Yeah. No, the gods just, I owe you a life debt. Several seconds later, Obi-Wan comes running around the corner.
Yep.
And he's being chased by the droid hovery thingy, the scout.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think there's two of them, in fact. And Qui-Gon does the lightsaber deflection thing. And
well, Obi-Wan is running the entire time. Like he's a perfectly fine fighter.
Yeah. And I think there's a line in the book. I think it mentions that like for some reason Obi-Wan didn't have his lightsaber at that moment.
Oh, that could be.
And then Qui-Gon found it or something. I can't really recall. But like in the movie, you're like, well, Obi-Wan has a lightsaber. Why doesn't he just...
Well, because in the movie, if he didn't have it, there would have been a close-up on him losing it.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, so then they, like, in the most clunky dialogue possible, Jar Jar's like, I can take you to the Gungan city.
And
then they're like, can you do that?
He's like,
no. And then they're like, well, just take us there anyway. And he's like, okay.
Okie day.
Okie day.
And then this is where my first note comes in.
Okay.
What the hell is going on? Brackets 20 minutes in.
There's so many. Again, I don't want to get into the stuff that Red Letter Media tread, but there is the like, why did the armies land on the other side of the planet?
Yeah, because I mean, we don't know that they did until we get down to the Gungan city, where Boss Nass is like the quickest way to the Naboo, who apparently only live in a certain area on this planet, is through the planet core, which means they're directly opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they never go through the planet core.
Well, we never see like a molten core, but in theory, they go through the planet and subterranean tunnels of some kind.
Because we see progressively bigger fish.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things in the book that the author is desperately trying to explain some things away. So the first thing is, and it's not like in your face, it's very subtle that I notice, is that he says something about the Naboo didn't have time to raise any kind of defense at all.
Right.
It's weird because they set them up as like a peaceful race, but yet they still have starfighters and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're clearly not.
They have some level of like, they have the Queen's chair has a slidey thing that like guns come out of,
with
like
two blasters
there just in case. So like I think here's my headcanon trying to make it sense based off this book, which by the way, also, ladies and gentlemen, this book is not Disney canon anymore. I forgot to mention that. This is like,
so the novelizations of the movies are not canon.
The novelizations are officially not canon, except for, actually, I think they've even said that like the Force Awakens novelization are not. I think the exact words that Dave Filoni said was they are not necessarily canon.
Okay. So it really is just what you see in the films and the TV shows that they say
so like when I
are.
bring stuff up in the novel, it's not like this is officially canon. It's interesting in the sense of here's another artist trying to fix holes.
A desperate grasp at an attempt.
Yeah, so like my headcanon based on the thing that like he talks about them not being able to put any kind of defense is like, so if you're the main city that they're trying to get to is called Theed. That is the Naboo capital where the Queen resides. If you have spaceships come right down at the capital, you could raise your defenses because you can see them coming.
Okay.
But if you land on the other side of the planet, and then like go the long way around,
right,
you're not really necessarily prepared for a ground assault.
Okay.
So maybe they were caught off guard because you just go right through the gate that's not closed, right?
But what?
That's the, like, it's not perfect. It's not perfect, Brendan. That's all I have.
I mean, you know what? You know what that is? That's better than nothing, which is what Lucas gave us. So, okay, we'll go with it.
There is a scene at some point in this movie, I can't remember where it exists in this timeline, but it's where it cuts to the Queen and her like council, I guess, and they're like, oh, there's been a communications blackout.
Yeah, they're talking to Sheev, and then the hologram cuts out.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's going on?
There's been a communications blackout. And the governor is like, that can mean only one thing.
Yes.
Invasion.
Yes.
Which then destroys my theory that I just proposed.
Yes.
Because if that means only one thing, regardless if it does or not,
right.
But to the characters it does.
Exactly.
You would raise your defenses at that point.
You'd at least close the gate.
You'd close the gate. And you'd
maybe lock it.
You'd open your little armchair and you'd pull out your guns and you would like hide in the closet.
Yeah.
And sing a rap song opera about it or something. I don't know. But they don't. They're just like
okay.
The Queen is just like, I will not do something that will bring this to war or something, right? And it's like, you're not gonna do if that you don't get to choose.
It's kind of past that.
It's like now. The moment Hitler started bombing England, they didn't have a choice.
No, they were in it.
They were in it. So yes, that's the thing that happens, and then we cut back to the Jedi at some point. I think what happens is they get to the city, then it cuts that scene, and then it cuts back and they're in front of...
They swim in, and then...
With the breathing things.
Right.
Which we then have established the Jedi cannot hold their breath forever.
No.
Which breaks the gas...
The scene earlier.
Where they just hold their breath.
Exactly. Maybe droids don't know how long humanoid life forms can hold their breath.
Well, but it's the Viceroy that says they must be dead by now.
That's true.
So the droids don't. These are. Remember, these are the hive mind droids.
Yes.
They just take commands. They don't do funny things and say Roger, Roger yet. They just take commands.
Right. These are Mark 1s.
Yeah, these are Mark 1s. These are the ones that need like the control center and all that garbage. So
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
so back to they get to the Gungan city.
Yeah.
And there's this like captain, this Gungan captain that's going to show up a couple of times. He has a name
With the mustache.
with the weird, tentacly mustache, and he's just like, "You in bad doo-doo this time, Jar Jar."
The fact that it's not just Jar Jar who speaks incomprehensibly, but it's the entire Gungan people, it just makes the plot, and it's not a clear plot, but it makes it that much harder to follow.
Just the whole language decisions.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. And then, like, the Gungan race doesn't make any sense either, because like most of them look like Jar Jar, and then there's like
Bosnas who looks like a frog.
who looks like either he's become so fat that like his head fat has engulfed his eyes,
Right.
because he doesn't have little like weird tentacle eye things
No,
that
they're
everyone
just-
else
yeah.
has. So it's like, are there different like species? Like, it's not even race, right? It's not like they have different colored skin. They're different
different.
species completely.
In the same way that you know, Padme is not the same species as Jar Jar. Jar Jar is not the same species as Bosnas.
Yeah, it's clear that they're different.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're talking to Boss Nass, who at this point is the only one of these creatures that we can understand, and he's basically like, "We'll help you to get rid of you."
Yeah. But then, so, because this comes back later, Qui-Gon Jinn has no problem using the Force to convince Boss Nass to do what Qui-Gon is saying. Because initially they go in and he's like, "I'm not going to help you," and then Qui-Gon's just like, "You will."
He waves his hand, but then it's not clear that it actually did anything. Because like usually when the Jedi like wave their hand and do that, they immediately go, "Okay, we'll help you." But Boss Nass like thinks about it.
I know it's weird.
Like, you're confused as if something actually happened here. But yeah, you're right. He does. He at least tries to use the
He's trying
Force.
it, whether it's successful or not. He's trying it, and that's going to come in later on.
So yeah, so he uses the Force, and Boss Nass is like, "All right, sure,
Take a boat
take this thing."
through the planet core.
This is one of the smartest little lines that Lucas put in this film, where they're like, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are, I think it's called like a bombardo or something. It's like some weird Gungan word for a ship, and Obi-Wan's like, what is that? And Qui-Gon's like, "A transport, I hope." And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Because like they wouldn't know what that is. They would just hope for the best.
I would have
Like,
loved it if they get to like a landing pad and it's just like 3 fish. and Jar Jar's like, "Misa okay day with this," and he just like grabs a hold and
It's the if you're familiar with the Little Mermaid, there's King Neptune's little, like, it's just like a giant conch shell that's pulled by some. That's what it is.
I love it.
That would have been the
perfect.
greatest cinematic moment in Star Wars ever.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so they start to walk away, and Qui-Gon is like, "Oh, what about Jar Jar?" Right? And like in the movie, it comes out of nowhere, right? And again, in the book, the author tries his best to explain this away. So through the whole book, there's way, as most books do, there's better characterization, because you
got the time and space.
You got the time and space, and you can tell me what the character is thinking in a moment instead of just having him. You have to motivate him to say something out loud in a movie. And at this point, we're kind of establishing that Qui-Gon is more, he's considered kind of a reckless Jedi in the sense that he really is in touch with the living Force, what they call the living Force, which is basically the Force that exists in the here and now. And in fact, there's a line earlier where I think it's back on the ship, the Trade Federation ship, where Obi-Wan is like, "I sense some danger or something, some far off removed danger." And Qui-Gon's like, "You need to be more present and consider the living Force." So Qui-Gon is always kind of just like listening to the Force and doing whatever his gut tells him. And that's basically what the book establishes. And it makes Qui-Gon's actions make
Far more sense.
in this movie. So I think in the movie he says, he's like, "I think Jar Jar still has a part to play in this."
Yeah.
So he's
something
like
that.
so he kind of makes up a reason for him to come with him, right? Is that Oh, he's got to come to the...
Well, so in the movie, he's like, we need a navigator.
Yeah, and that's the reason he comes up with that exact moment.
Which I love because very quickly in the boat, Jar Jar's like, I don't know where we are. It's like, what a great pick in a navigator.
And then Qui-Gon is literally like, the Force will guide us.
Yeah.
Which again...
So, I mean, really, he doesn't... Yeah.
He's all... yeah, so... Because in my mind, Qui-Gon doesn't actually think that in that moment, Jar Jar will be a good navigator. He just thinks that later down the road... it's like when you're playing D&D and the dungeon master is like, you talk to this person and they're very hinty that this person is super important. So you're like, okay, we better go talk to this person.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of metagaming. Qui-Gon's kind of metagaming right now. And obviously, we're jumping ahead, but Qui-Gon or Jar Jar does become important because he brings the army. He's the one who bridges that gap.
Yeah.
Because he's basically the link to the Gungans for them from that moment forward.
Right.
Which is silly, but moving on. So basically Qui-Gon's like, okay, Jar Jar owes me a life debt, so he's got to come with me because I'm just assuming laws at this point.
Right. According to your gods.
Which is like...
Fine.
You can see the logic that because it's like primitive race, they still believe in like deities of some kind and life debts. Surely it's not too far of a hop and a skip to get here. So they take Jar Jar and they get on this ship that's like very fish-like, which is a nice little design. Feels very...
it was good.
Feels like Gungan technology, right? Which is confusing, and we'll get to that later. The level of sophistication the Gungans have
from this primitive race,
which is just strange. It's like if Ewoks were just like, oh, by the way, our moon's a Death Star. Wait, what? We'll just blow up the other Death Star.
I like to imagine the Naboo or the Nubians or whatever they are. They just like throw their garbage into the water, and then Gungans are like, "We'll see, day what this," and then they learn how to like use things.
So they're scavengers.
Yeah,
there you go.
Which is a thread through all of Star Wars.
Well, that's
it rhymes.
That's a good little piece of headcanon you got going on there.
Just made that up now.
Even though their technology is completely different from the Naboo, I'll take it.
Well, that's why, because it's thrown out. The Naboo are like, we don't need this anymore. We need something better.
We don't need these like ball energy things. No. Just throw them in the swamp.
Yeah.
And that's why the Gungans are upset with them. Because they're like, you keep polluting our planet with these literal explosives.
Look, it's layers, man. It's layers.
It's all about those layers. And it's got to rhyme.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's officially the first It Rhymes joke that we've made.
Yes.
And I think on that
note...
More
to come. Oh, wow. Look at the time.
Look at the time. That was 30 minutes, and we are now another 15 minutes into the movie. So with that, we will leave this episode behind. Thank you for tuning in and listening. We will see you next week.
Yeah, thank you for stopping by.